Hello and welcome back to Surf Splendor, episode number 565. Today's guest was Surfer Magazine's editor from 1990 to 1998. Those are the precise years that I discovered surfing. It's the years that I first subscribed to Surfer Magazine. So I think that it would be fair to say that my entire view of the surf world was a direct reflection of Steve Hawk's own interpretation of it. Born in Pensacola, Florida in 1955, but raised in San Diego, Hawk began surfing and skating in his early teens. Incidentally, he actually gave his younger brother, Tony, his first skateboard. Tony, of course, would go on to become the most famous skateboarder of all time. We don't actually discuss Tony Hawk here in today's episode, but if you want to hear them discuss their relationship, their dynamic growing up, there's a number of other places. I know they were on Kate Hudson's podcast. It's called Sibling Revelry. So go check that out if you're interested. But Steve also discovered in his youth a passion for writing, and that would become the central pursuit for most of his career. And it's going to be the focus of much of our discussion here today. There are a couple of things that we don't discuss that are definitely worth noting, and those are his environmental activism and his philanthropy work. He worked for the Sierra Club as the executive editor of their magazine. He also ran Tony Hawk's Foundation, which focuses on investing in low-income communities. So like I said, lots to unpack here today. Those are very notable. We don't get into them, but we are already discussing having him back on a second episode, so we'll do it there. Anyways, before we get into the show, we owe a quick thanks to our partners without whom Surf Splendor would not be possible. So that is the Surfrider Foundation, Real Water Sports, and Veyer Watches. The ocean needs more friends, so become a member at surfrider.org. And funnily enough, when I did subscribe to Surfer Magazine as a 16-year-old, they also had one of those little tearaway postcards for the Surfrider Foundation membership. I was 16 years old. I had my first job and my first checkbook, and that was one of the very first checks that I ever wrote, was to become a member at the Surfrider Foundation. So I was spread pretty thin between those two subscriptions. But it's kind of interesting. I had no idea what that investment would become, and that I would actually be working with them today as partners 30 years later. So pretty cool. Anyways, I'm still a member of Surfrider Foundation, and you should be as well. So learn more about their work from your local beach all the way to Capitol Hill at surfrider.org. And then Real Water Sports is our retail partner. They're opening their Waterman's Retreat to anybody attending the Bragg Summit on the Outer Banks of North Carolina this month. And you'll get a 15% discount if you stay at the Waterman's Retreat because of your association with Bragg. So you can book it at watermansretreat.com or realwatersports.com. I've stayed there with my family, my wife and my kid. We absolutely loved it. It's right on the water. It's really, really nice. It's a condo complex. They have the whole building, and there's a number of condos in there. So go check that out through realwatersports.com. And then Veyer Watches is our official timekeeping partner. High quality, durable, and stylish timepieces. Save 15% on your next watch purchase at veyerwatches.com/surfsplendor. Enjoy that. Okay, without further ado, my name is David Scales for Surf Splendor. Here's my conversation with one of my favorite surf world writers that we really don't get to hear from nearly enough anymore, Steve Hawk. Enjoy.
Surf Splendor.
How much of your life's trajectory would you say is dedicated to the hot dog?
When I was about 5, my parents, who never made much money, decided to supplement their income by selling hot dogs and foot-long hot dogs and hamburgers on the beach at Ocean Beach in San Diego. This was before the pier was built. And kind of right where there's a big parking lot now, maybe a quarter mile north of the pier, like the biggest lot, what used to be an indoor carousel, a merry-go-round. And they took the merry-go-round out, and it was just this big empty space. And in one corner of it, my parents had this hot dog stand, and in another corner of it, someone had a rental place where you can rent beach mats and umbrellas and stuff like that, rafts. So I was on the beach from 8 in the morning till sunset, from age 5 till 9 or 10, all summer long in San Diego. So my whole family, I have two older sisters then. My younger brother wasn't born yet. Um, and my dad, my mom, my sisters, we all body surfed. My dad surfed a little bit, but I learned to body surf when I was like 6 or 7. Um, and and then that's kind of when it just the ocean got into my bloodstream. Yeah.
So that was early 60s.
Yeah, I was born in 55, so this would have been like 60 through 65-ish.
Wow.
It wasn't until later my sister Pat, who's 5 years older than me, she started surfing some when she was like 17, 18, and she had a boyfriend who surfed, and then I would go to the beach with her. That was the first time stood up on a board and felt that sensation. Then I was hooked.
I've heard you speak a lot about your father and really positively about your father and the way that
Mhm.
he kind of prioritized his time with his children more than work. But I've never heard you really talk about your mom. What's her story?
My mom was the sweet and salty meal that were my parents.
Okay.
My mom was the sweetest woman alive. Yeah, just ridiculously kind and generous and welcoming and super liberal. She raised her kids and then started even while I was when I was young, she was working because my dad never made a ton of money, and she started working as a secretary for local schools, including she was the principal secretary at the high school I went to in San Diego at Kearney High.
Oh, okay.
Um, and and just kind of everyone remembers her as just being sweet and not enforcing rules, and uh, but she went on to get her bachelor's degree, and then she got her PhD in education at age 64. Taught at junior colleges around San Diego and into her early 70s.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was she was teaching typing and things like that, like she wasn't teaching history. Um, I actually visited a couple of her classes once, kind of like as a guest lecturer. And um, but yeah, I mean the story of my mom is that she was just so this is how I best summarize her, I think. When she died right before COVID hit, she was 93. Her last 5 years, she didn't say a word because she had dementia. She had Alzheimer's. Um, and so her death was kind of a blessing. We actually kind of let them keep her alive probably a few years too long. Um, but as she was slipping into this dementia, she kind of only could keep a few phrases, and I think one thing that's interesting about Alzheimer's is that a lot of times it boils a person's personality down to their core. Like I've had some friends, relatives whose parents just got evil as they slipped into dementia. All this bitterness and resentment that had been inside them forever just came out. My mom was exactly the opposite. So sure, her life, so I've told the story a few times. Her life story boiled down to the four things that she kept with her. That the last thing she could say was, um, I've had a wonderful life. I have 4 beautiful children. I can't believe I've been healthy for this long, and I'm ready to go. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, my mom was really, really incredibly sweet. My
That
dad,
is
kind of a grump, but it was more of almost like a shtick. Like he wasn't really angry. He just had this kind of gruff exterior. He'd been in the Navy
right.
um, and but he was one of those show don't tell kind of guys. Like he I don't think he ever once said to me, I love you, but he showed it every day, you know. He was there for us every day. Uh, Too often now, and my generation particularly, like, I turned 18, I moved out of the house. Like I was done with my parents. Um, and I mean, I love them, but I wanted to go off and do my own thing. And I think I missed a lot of opportunities to sit down with my dad and really ask him about like what was the war like? What was your childhood like? I was so involved in my own shit.
When I've heard you talk about your father, it's I'm sure there's, misgivings, but I've only heard you speak very favorably about him. And and like how supportive he was basically of your guys' endeavors. And I appreciated hearing you speak of him that way because I don't know. A lot of people, maybe it's just in my age group. I'm in my early 40s, and a lot of my peers, I don't know of a lot of people who really have respect and love and admiration for their parents. But I
Mhm.
think if you can get to that point, there is, it's healthy and it allows you to kind of live your best life.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And if you are holding on to resentments, especially resentments um, that happened when you or that surfaced when you were in your teens or a young adult, fucking let them go. you know
Totally.
yeah, even if they're justified. I mean, justified resentment is the worst kind of resentment because
Interesting.
because you feel like you have the right to it. You're not just manufacturing it, and it's in many times I think it's the cause of alcoholism. Like fuck it. I was beat up. I get to drink. Um, and those are the hardest resentments to let go. But at some point you have to. Um,
I mean, it's only hurting yourself. I mean, it's easier for me to say those words, but it's true. It's only holding on to the resentment is only damaging oneself.
yeah. I actually think you could say justified resentment in some ways is the root of all evil in the world. Like think about what's going on in Gaza right now. Like those people are watching their children get killed. That's a resentment that's never going to go away. And then they in turn attack Israel. They kill somebody's kids over there. That resentment's never going to go away. And then, what next thing you have is ultimately you have the Holocaust. This is like,
Well, easier said than done.
right.
How do you let go of the resentment?
Yeah, I know. But you always hear those stories about people who do manage it. It's just it's powerful and it can be really beautiful um and just turn you into a better person for sure.
Yeah, I guess
Mm. There's
how
a
to let how to let go of the resentment is probably a different answer for each individual person, but I suppose acknowledging that that is what you need to do is probably the first step, and then look into ways
sure.
that
Yeah,
might make sense.
I've never been uh, to an AA meeting, although some people might argue that I should have at some point in my life. Um, uh, but I think that's one of the early parts of that
The
program.
12 steps.
The
Yeah.
12 steps is letting go of the resentment. Yeah. I had the good fortune to work with David Milch for a while, the guy who created Deadwood and NYPD Blue and all that. And um, he was recovering addict of addicted to everything at one point. But he used to say all the time um, that the past is constantly in the process of being redefined by the future. Um, and uh, and if you look at a lot of his stories, especially the better stories in Deadwood, they're people who went through really terrible stuff when they were young, but who can't find a way to turn that around as an adult into something helpful and powerful and beautiful.
Mm.
In his own life, in Milch's own life, his older brother watched his dad commit suicide
Oh
in
my
front of
God.
him because his dad was going crazy and was accusing his brother of sleeping with his wife, accusing his son of sleeping with his wife because he was a lunatic. And and his brother ultimately, that was when he was a teenager. That was obviously as traumatizing a thing as you can go through. And he later went on to become a doctor who um, uh, helped people with similar kind of trauma. Like he turned it around. Um, and you know, that's the kind of things he would often do with his stories.
Unbelievable. But relatable, I think, in a lot of ways to maybe a less intense degree for a lot of people in their life.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
well, yeah, kind of transitioning back to you and your trajectory. Do you remember when you discovered an interest in writing?
yeah, actually, it was early. Um, and uh, probably kind of shallow, like a shallow entry. Like I remember I wrote a thing. Um, I wrote some stupid little poem when I was in like fourth grade, and the teacher liked it, and she submitted it, and it got into this county-wide paper, uh, um, that from all the school districts, this little like brochure thing. But then once I wrote a short story in when I was in like fifth or sixth grade, and I read part of it aloud in class, and someone, I think it was like this, as I recall, it was this cute girl I kind of had a crush on, came up and said, "I really liked that one line." Like she specifically said one line. And I thought, wow, I like the performative aspect of it, like I like getting praise for it. And then that was the one thing I sort of in school that kind of came easy to me. Like English classes and writing essays and stuff was never a big struggle. And then I went to college. I didn't really know what I was going to study. I went to UC Santa Barbara. Um, and I had one teacher there who changed my life, who taught a class called creative nonfiction writing. His name was Barry Farrell. He went on to become a really good friend after college, and I ultimately put together a collection of his best magazine pieces after he died. Um, but his best friends were Joan Didion and her husband John Gregory Dunn.
What?
In fact, his daughter's name, Joan Didion, is her godmother, and her name is Joan Didion Farrell. Um, and so he brought them to our class, our writing class. Um, and Unfortunately, he brought both of them, and John Gregory Dunn was a huge personality, and Joan Didion, as she wrote in Slouching Towards Bethlehem, was um, neurotically inarticulate and shy. So he would do all the talking, but everybody wanted to hear from her. It was right when Slouching Toward Bethlehem had come out. Her start, she was really on the rise. But but Barry Farrell, my teacher, was uh, an amazing journalist for his era, one of the best of his generation. When I put together his collection, I got cover blurbs from two people who never write cover blurbs, Calvin Trillin and John McPhee, writing about him, and Norman Mailer. Um, and Because they all loved him so much. He was a serious alcoholic, though. Barry, he died like at 49 of a heart attack and all kinds of stuff because he drank so much.
Wow.
Uh, but while he was teaching our class, it was once a week on a Monday night. Um, he was covering the Gary Gilmore trial in Utah. Gary Gilmore was the guy who insisted on being executed in the 70s.
Okay.
Norman Mailer turned it into the book, The Executioner's Song,
Okay.
which won a Pulitzer. Um, he was doing the last jailhouse interviews with Gilmore, my teacher, Barry Farrell, uh, and flying. And that was one of the biggest news stories in the country at that moment. This guy who said, Stop the appeals. I want to," and they executed by firing squad.
Oh my gosh.
I want to shoot me, basically. Um, and so it was this huge story. And Barry would fly in from Provo, Utah to Santa Barbara, teach our class, and then in the morning get back on the plane and fly back to cover all these proceedings. And so we had like firsthand insider account of one of the biggest news stories going on in the country from this guy who was just had the greatest storytelling techniques. Um, and I just remember thinking, fuck, that's what I want to do. Like what this guy's doing right now, like I want to be on the cutting edge of, like, I want to be there at the tip of the spear for all these big news stories that are going on. Um, and he was a ruthless teacher and editor. Like we had to write 1,000 words a week, all these different assignments. And he had and he would go through them with a pencil, and then he would write like a 200-word note at the beginning, like basically this is really good or this sucks. Um, but he had ink stamps. He had one that said bullshit on it, and he stamped that in red over a paragraph if he thought you were just if you were not being honest or if you were, not you were trying to make up for a lack um, of reportage by adding a bunch of filigree and, uh, well, and he also had another one that said, dangling modifier, the little hand, as we all learned about how not to dangle modifiers. We had us all read Strunk White, the Elements of Style, which has the great line, omit needless words, which is a succinct way you could put that. Um, and one of the best exercises he did that I've used because I've taught some writing since, and he would have us turn in our paper. One time we came in, we all turned in our paper, this 1,000-word thing, and sitting in front of all of our chairs was a freshly sharpened green pencil. And he said, "Okay, I want you all to go into these pieces and take the next 20 minutes cutting out exactly 113 words." Or he gave us some number, like cut out. I want you to trim it to, and so we had to count the words we were cutting out. And he said, and don't do it wholesale, like don't just cut a paragraph out, but like tighten sentences. And that was the best exercise I ever went through as a writer. And because you realize, wow, that 20-word sentence that I was so in love with is actually better at 16 words.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole bunch of junk in there you don't need.
Fascinating.
And I also realized, so he'd been a staff writer at Life magazine. That was where he met Joan Didion. They were alternating weekly columns at Life magazine. Um, and, uh, and when you work in the magazines, what I later came to realize, both magazines and newspapers, was, you've got limited space. So the art director will lay it out and they'll flow in the text. And then a lot of times the text would be an inch or two too long. So you'd have to go back and, kill widows and paragraphs and all that stuff. If you've been in the world, you know what I'm talking about. And that's also a great exercise. I came to kind of like that when I was at the magazine. Like, oh, this thing's 100 words too long. Yeah, give it to me. I know I can get 100 words out of this, without, and make it better probably. So
Yeah.
sometimes you lose stuff you don't want to lose, but
Yeah. Yeah.
just ask the art director to make the photos smaller so you can have
Right.
it.
Um, so kind of having that experience and coming out with that level of fervor for the art or the discipline of it,
Yeah,
why would you get into surfing? Or why would you get into editing surf magazines? I mean,
yeah.
you probably know that.
It's a good question.
You know what I mean by that
Yeah,
question.
no,
Like
yeah,
all of that
it's a good
sounds
question.
thrilling and
I thought about
exciting.
that myself.
Surfing feels almost frivolous compared to it.
Yes, yes, for sure. Um, and so uh, what happened right after college, I was waiting tables. I was trying to be a freelance writer, but I didn't really have any skills at all. And I ended up, one of my roommates in college moved to the Big Island. So with his girlfriend, and I had her parents owned property there, so I had a free place to stay. So I moved to the Big Island, and I was surfing. Like surfing was as important to writing for me at that point. I was surfing all through high school. I was on the team in high school. I was on the Santa Barbara surf team. I was traveling all over. Um, I did back-to-back years. I did 2-month-long trips from San Diego to Cabo and back, just in my Volkswagen van with a buddy. So, I was all in. And I moved to the Big Island. Uh, I realized that it was sort of the land of the lotus eaters. Like there was nobody there was interested in anything but getting high and surfing and eating mushrooms. The people, there were a lot of mushrooms eating going on. And after about 6 months, I had to get back to California, and then I applied for a job on a newspaper and got a job at a little weekly in Solana Beach called the San Diego Citizen. And I was making 150 bucks a week. This was in 79. Um, and I was waiting tables on weekends so I could pay my rent. So I started working in newspapers, and at that era when newspapers were robust, and it was actually it was a solid way to make a career. It was a career. It was the path was really obvious. You work for a while at a small paper, you build up a set of clips, you take those clips, go to another paper. And what was cool about newspapers, unlike say being an accountant or something, was it didn't matter how long you were at it if your clips were good. So like young, if you had some talent and they saw that, they didn't require a ton of experience. You could move up pretty quickly. Um, and I was pretty good, but I wasn't like, gonna ever win a Pulitzer. Um, and so I went from the San Diego Citizen to this paper in Oceanside called the Blade Tribune. All these papers are dead now. Um, and that was a daily, and that was a whole different experience. And then I went from there to this paper in Escondido that was really had a good reputation. It was small, like 40,000, called 40,000 circulation, called the Times Advocate. And they had a great editor. There were really good reporters there, really hungry. A lot of them went on to have great careers from that little paper, like Wall Street Journal, uh, Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times. Um, and uh, and that was where I really kind of learned how to report and and get facts. So to get back to your question, uh, the other thing I learned though was that newspaper jobs can be boring as fuck.
Mm,
You can end up sitting through hours of city council meetings, hearing people argue about sewer permits. Um, and I did a lot of that. I covered a lot of that stuff. But ultimately went from the Times Advocate I leaped to a pretty good big paper, the Orange County Register, which is still around. But at that point, the Register was, I think, the second biggest paper in California. It was like 450,000 circulation. Um, and I was there for 6 years. And that was where I really kind of learned how to be a professional journalist. Um, but it was in Orange County, which is where both Surfer and Surfing were based, the magazines. So, and at every newspaper I worked at, I was always sort of I would get all the surf stories.
sure. Do you remember the first piece that you had published in a surf magazine?
For sure.
What was it?
Uh, it was a trip that one of my good friends, Jeff Gill, who lives in Santa Barbara, who I went to college with, he was an amateur photographer, and he and I and another guy, a friend of ours named Kenji, uh, flew to Costa Rica and then got a really small plane and landed in a cow pasture near Pavones um, in '86. So we camped on Pavones. We stayed in this little hotel for like $3 a night at Pavones with the three of us and two other surfers for a week. Um, and I wrote about that trip because my
Wow.
my buddy Jeff got some. He was down there before us. He kind of met us at the airport. He was on it alone when it got like 8 foot. He was at Pavones alone on an 8 foot south swell, and he had lineup shot after lineup shot. But, um, so yeah, I did the first story about Pavones. Came back. He was a water photographer too, so we had some pretty good shots. Fortunately, there were two kids who were already there who were younger than us, who were better surfers. So he had some rippers on the trip, guys who
Okay.
put a board on rail and stuff.
Mm,
Uh, but I remember so I sold it to Surfer. Um, Paul Holmes was editing then. Um, and I think Warshaw had just started. This was '86.
okay.
Um, and Jeff Devine was the photo editor. And I remember when it came out, I ran to the surf shop and grabbed it and like bought it and pointed to this poor kid behind the counter. I was like, I wrote this. I wrote this. And I flipped. The main thing I wanted was to see a photo of myself, and they didn't pick any photos of me in
Oh no.
the That was my bad. I did have
Uh,
a,
do you still have that issue?
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, good, good, good.
It's called Stuck in the Corner was the title. Because we
Okay,
never, we didn't, we just said it was in Central. I think we said it was in Costa Rica.
okay.
Um, but but then on the strength of that, because I also I pitched it to surfing also. And they didn't take it. Flame didn't. Somehow I knew those guys a little bit. So I actually talked to Flame before I went. Larry Moore, the photo editor at Surfing at the time. Um, and but I got to know Dave Gilovich, who was running the show there, and Bill Sharp. And so they started assigning me some stuff, and I started writing for them. I did like a profile of Jimmy Hogan. I think I did a profile of Jeff Booth. Um, and I covered that trestles contest that Kelly won, the first one for them. They sent me up to Santa Cruz to cover one of the Coldwater Classics. So I was kind of so I started building some clips and getting known a little bit. And then Warshaw quietly announced that he was leaving Surfer. And um, they tracked me down through a headhunter of all things.
Oh, okay. Well, you were hired as the editor in 1990. Rob Gilly, I don't know if you remember this, but he called you, quote, the Patrick Swayze of surf editing, referring to the Roadhouse character that Swayze played.
I have that piece. That was a really nice uh,
Um,
this piece by him. Other than the Patrick Swayze analogy, that was a
did you
fun.
disagree with the analogy?
I didn't quite understand where he was going with it because I never saw the movie.
Funny enough, I never saw the movie either. He was kicking ass and taking names, right? So I think what Gilly's uh, what he intended to mean was that you changed the magazine from.
Oh,
So I was going to ask you like what direction was the magazine going prior under Warshaw's editing, and then what did you do, and what was your ambition?
I didn't really come in thinking I'm going to try to shake things up. I thought it was, first of all, that was the magazine I grew up with. And I started reading it when I was 13. And I remember when I got to college, this teacher I was talking about, Barry Farrell, at one point, I asked him if he had ever heard of Drew Campion, who was, in my mind, the greatest journalist alive, because it was all I read. And I was shocked that he'd never heard of Drew Campion. So, my main thinking when I got that job was, do not fuck this up. Like this is an important job. Um, it's it called itself the Bible of the sport, which was always kind of gross, but it kind of was, like it was the first. Um, what's interesting about Surfer actually is that not only was it the first surf mag, it was one of the first niche sports mags to get sort of national attention, especially to just sort of celebrate one of the first to kind of celebrate not just competition, but the um, the aesthetic aspect, the wilderness aspect of it. It was like Surfer, Field and Stream, Guns and Ammo, Hot Rod. I went back and looked through old issues. The circulation of Surfer in '68 was like 90,000, 84,000, something like that. And when I got there, it was like 120,000.
Wow.
A lot of non-surfers were reading it because there just weren't that many magazines on newsstands at the time. Um,
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, if you actually look at the history of surfing, there was through Gidget and a couple of other things, just massive, the Endless Summer, of course,
right.
massive mainstream appeal, more than there is
Exactly.
now to a lot of,
Yeah.
in a lot
Yeah.
of
So
ways.
I think there was a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
By the time I got there, there were 6 surf mags in the US alone. I think we did a count once, there were 35 surf magazines all around the world.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so my feeling was just don't blow it. But I just kind of, I had this experience as a newspaper reporter, and I wanted to make sure that, uh, we did stories that were accurate and that had some reporting behind them and some real research. Um, it used to piss me off sometimes when people would say, "Hey, I'm going to go on a surf trip. Do you want me to write a story?" And I say, "Yeah, great. We've got Ted Grambeau on the trip, and you've got great surfers do it." And then they'd come back and had not taken one note while they were there. They just came back and figured they'd make it up. And I finally got to the point where I said, "Look, if you're going to go someplace on our dime, you're not just a surfer. You're a reporter. Like interview people, see what's going on in the room. Take
Yeah.
notes, paint the scene." Um, and I've talked about this a lot, like with other surf writers, which is that when you write a story about a surf trip, the surfing is the least interesting part. All the interesting stuff happens on land, or but interactions with the locals, or clashes between the surfers, or and also it's in the surf mag, the photos take care of that.
Totally.
Yeah, like you said, it was the mission was pretty shallow. Keep people stoked about surfing to
Yeah.
sell board shorts.
Well, what was your idea behind hiring David Carson?
Yeah, that was probably the most disruptive thing I did while I was there. At least immediately disruptive. And I remember, so David was working at a little magazine that we produced on the side called Beach Culture, where he had free reign graphically. And some of those are classics, the old beach cultures now, because that was the early David Carson, and a lot of art students hold on to those. And I felt like our design at the time was just sort of stuck in the 80s. This was like 90, 91, 92. And meanwhile, in the back room at Surfer, there was this guy producing this magazine that was just as far in front of the cutting edge of graphic design that you could find. And uh, so I brought him in, and he, you know, David's David's a big personality, and he's got like he's not boisterous, but he's very stubborn, and he it's one of the reasons why he's such a famous artist, because he sticks to his guns. And he had initial ideas that were just so wacky that I had to like kind of say, no, we can't do that. We had some clashes. I don't know. I've seen some interviews with him, and he doesn't look back on those years that kindly. He
Oh, really?
a lot of kind. He felt well, there was a publisher at the time who was my boss, who really was worried that we were going too far. So that was where he kind of aims his resentment. But we had some clashes. But at the same time, the issue before David Carson's design, and then the one that he designed, are night and day. You know, and we got a lot of shit, but we also got a lot of praise. And then I think eventually all the other mags kind of started following him,
Hmm.
following us, and he changed the look of action sports magazines for sure.
It
If
feels
not,
like, though, from that first issue, moving on, he kind of softened, or, came back. Like, it went real fringe initially, and then he kind of brought it back to more res
yeah,
reserved or whatever.
yeah. Like I don't know if you remember the first issue. You don't put up stuff like on your,
If you have it, I can.
but the first issue that he did was a shot of this guy Sean Monroe doing a big hack on a closeout, like a really nice kind of floater thing, and he had long hair and his hair was flying back. It's really this kind of punk shot, like, and he wanted to do black and white, and the publisher wanted to do color, and we are going back and forth. And at one point, we had them both printed out. He took it and he just ripped it in half vertically and put the black and white next to the color and said, "How about that?" And so it was half color, half black and white with this kind of tear. And and we all went, "Fuck, yes, that's exactly right. That's a statement." And, and then that's the kind of how a lot of times he worked, like all these happy accidents, not the like, in the moment, he'd say, "Well, fuck, what if we just do this?" And you'd go, "Yes, that's it."
Super cool.
The other crazy thing
Um,
about Carson was, he at that point in his career, he didn't know anything about how to use computers. So he would build a really beautiful cover, print it out, and then go back into that file and build another cover and print it out, and go back into that file and build another cover and print it out, and never hit save, never do a save as. So we had printouts of like 15 beautiful covers, and we'd all say that one. And where is it? And we'll have to remake it.
that's ridiculous. Well, talk about what was the reason you left, and then who did you find to replace yourself at Surfer?
Well, so the reason I left was partly because I found the right person to replace me. I hired Evan Slater, which was the best hire I've ever made in any job I've ever been in. That guy
Wow.
is an all-star.
Wow.
Yeah, he was quick learner, hard fucking worker, um, super solid, just like emotionally speaking, and like high emotional intelligence. Um, and when he first arrived, wasn't a great writer, like didn't have kind of an ear, but he was one of the first people I saw just put his head down and get better and better and better at it. He really turned into a great wordsmith and reporter and all that stuff. Um, and and so I was, at that point I was in my mid to late 30s. I think I started when um, I started in 90, so I was 35.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I was actually getting, I was in my 40s at that point. And and it was like you said, like it started to feel like, am I just going to spend my life writing about this one frivolous activity, even though it means so much to me, and there's a lot of stories to be plumbed in the surf world. You can clearly make a you can like look at what Matt Warshaw's done. I mean, he's found all the interesting stories and made a life out of that. So I don't mean to demean it in surf journalism in that regard, but in the magazines, it kind of gets repetitive. Like
Yeah.
remember what happened was we had this meeting at my house. I brought in all of our most important contributors and staff and photographers and there was like 12 of us around this table. And we were going to plan our annual big issue. We were at that point we were doing these oversized issues. And it was like 6 months out. And I looked around the table and I thought, God, I don't have the fire for this. Like I don't care that much about what the next big issue is going to look like. And the person in the seat needs to care about that. Like you can't have, I've said this a few times, like I didn't want to be the guy in his late 50s with who's balding and still got the little kind of ponytail, you know, trying to
That guy's the
talk,
worst.
trying to talk hip to the kids. Um, and fortunately, at that point, Evan was on board as the kind of the number two guy, and I just knew he was gonna going to be fine. So I kind of quietly gave notice, and I was like 6 months. I gave him 6 months notice.
Okay.
And then when I left, I actually stayed on retainer I was going to be on retainer for a year, just sort of behind the scenes, but he didn't, as soon as I was out the door, he didn't need me.
Yeah.
um, I mean, Evan, and then I'm moving on to Surfline, and I hired Evan away from Surfer to come to Surfline, and then Surfline had fell apart, and Evan went back to Surfing magazine with Flame, who I also had hired away from Surfing at Surfline. And and those years when Flame and Evan were at Surfing Magazine, if you go back and look at those issues when he had Taylor Paul and Travis Ferre, and I think that's the best era for any Surf Mag era. Those guys were crushing it.
Would that have been like 99, 2000?
I think it might have been, yeah, into the early 2000s,
Okay.
2003, 2004, something like that. Um, yeah, like Evan just had so much attention to detail to every nook and cranny of the magazine, like even the small stuff in the back of the book was really good and funny, thoughtful, well edited.
Yeah.
And he planned it well in advance. So he wasn't just dashing issues out. Yeah.
Gotcha. Which is hard to do when you're on the month to month
Yeah,
hamster
when you're on the
wheel.
treadmill, it's hard to think 6 months out for sure. Yeah.
Totally. Um, I don't know if this was directly after, but you ended up with swell.com. Can you
Yeah.
tell me about that offer and
Yeah.
what?
Um, so uh in when I left Surfer in um 90, 98, 99, it was right the peak of the first dot-com boom. And it was um there were a few people out there with kind of VC money looking to capture the action sports space. So uh and I was I had just been the editor of the biggest surf mag. I had this famous skateboarder for a brother. And I think people thought, well, we want this guy to run our editorial thing, you know. So we got hired by this company called swell.com, which had like $30 million or something to try to build a website. And by the way, just for the millions and millions of dollars they spent building that website, you could now build a website just as good for free.
It's crazy. And I don't want to jump ahead in the storyline, but I think people already know the storyline. But they were just ahead of their time. That was the only problem.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
especially because we had all the stuff that required broadband and nobody had it. People were still up, dialing into the internet on their phones. So you had to through the modem thing.
what they built to me felt fantastical at the time, and I wasn't ready to purchase that way.
Yeah,
But now, 25 years later or whatever, it's like, duh, that's the way it all operates. They saw it 20 years in advance
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and built
Really
it. The
amazing way.
customers just weren't ready for it.
Yeah, they gave me such a big budget that I was going to I went to Fleet to Flame, who'd been the photo editor at Surfing forever, and said, um, "How much money will it take to get you away from surfing, like annual salary?" And we gave him like a 50% bump, and like some big. So I was able to go to all these guys who were making shit money at the surf mags and say, "Come." But we also did a snowboard site called crossrocket.com, and we did a skateboard site called monsterskate.com. And I hired Rob Campbell, who'd been the editor of Snowboarder, to do the snowboard site. I had Melissa Larson on that team, who was one of the best female action sports writers ever. Uh, and I got Sean Mortimer to do the skateboard site. He's the guy who ghost wrote my brother's autobiography back in the day. Um, we had this incredible team. We spent like $100,000 putting together a map of California, an online map of all the surf spots on the mainland America, like just ridiculous. And it was never saw the light of day. Cross Rocket had these interactive maps about um, of all like 6 or 7 of the best resorts for snowboarding that you could scroll over and they tell you here's where you go when there's this much snow. And that site never launched. Like they shut the whole thing down and the public never saw it. It was,
Brutal.
um, and yeah, so at one point I had like 35 people working under me on all these editorial teams. Evan was running the surf thing, Rob Campbell was running the snow thing, Sean Mortimer was running the skate thing. They all had people below them. And then over the course of like a year, I went to like I had to lay off friends. Like it was hard. Rob Campbell, the snowboard editor, I had to let him go on his birthday.
Oof.
So I brought him into my office. I had a birthday card and a bottle of whiskey. And I said, and everybody knew it was coming, like people were just, And the birthday card said, "Happy birthday, you're fired." And I gave him a shot of whiskey. Um, and then eventually it was just like me and Marcus Sanders and Dave Gilovich. Um, and Marcus is still there.
I know. Good for him. And by the way, we've only said swell.com, but they owned surfline.com as well.
Yeah.
So
So what
that's
happened
where
then was the
Marcus is.
guy who had all this money for Swell, Jeff Berg was the kind of brains behind it, who I always liked a lot. I've lost touch with him completely. I don't know where he is, but Jeff, if you're out there, uh, DM me and we'll connect. Um, but Jeff was a really cool, thoughtful guy, I thought, and I knew Sean Collins at Surfline from way back. I actually, proud to say, I wrote the first newspaper story about Surfline ever written back in the mid '80s when I was at the Orange County Register
Amazing.
when they were doing wave facts.
Hmm.
And his origin story is amazing, Sean Collins. But um, so I introduced Jeff Berg to Sean Collins, and that was how we ended up um, acquiring Surfline. And then at some point they said, look, we're not going to call this swell.com because that's got no juice. Whereas the brand Surfline has got so much market goodwill. We're going to call it Surfline. And I remember Evan and I were like, no, 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 it's Swell. We had in our mind it was Swell the whole time, but that was the right call to just call it Surfline. And then
Yeah.
Swell became kind of online store.
Right.
Um, but yeah, those were got talk about working hours. We worked some long fucking hours launching that website, till like 2 or 3 in the morning for a week on end. Uh,
Um, I mean, you've talked about the hardship of firing other people and all that sort of stuff, but how did your life get rearranged through taking that job and then watching the bust?
um, well, the best part about it was that it moved me to Half Moon Bay. So the idea was that they were gonna because all the tech people were up here in the Bay Area, they actually moved the headquarters. They opened initially. The headquarters was in San Francisco, in the Richmond, um, and then and they gave me a signing bonus when I got the job, and they paid our moving costs up to here. And my wife and I looked around and we realized that Half Moon Bay was, as a surfer, is kind of the best place to live in this area because you're half hour from the city. If you live north of the city, it's pretty hard to get to the ocean. Be within striking distance of the ocean, and also, if you either live at like Stinson or, I can see the ocean from my house here in Half Moon Bay, and there's so much swell around here, and we have a view of Mavericks from our house. Um,
Wow.
so um, Half Moon Bay just kind of seemed the obvious place to move, so we moved here, and and then literally like a year and a half after we moved here, the whole thing crashed. Surfline contracted, shut down the San Francisco office, and moved into an office about a mile and a half from the house we had sold in San Clemente to move up here. Um, and so I was commuting, like I was flying down out of San Jose airport once a week, and because you couldn't work remotely at that point. Um, and then eventually I just was part of the layout also. But my wife and I kind of looked around and said, we just loved it so much more up here than down in crowded Southern California. Um, and, we're 20 minutes from one of the wildest stretches of coast. That stretch between Half Moon Bay and Santa Cruz is just wide open and beautiful. So we decided to stay and just figure it out. And then my wife she left a job at the LA Times to move up here. And then she got rehired back at the LA Times and was one of the first people allowed to kind of work remotely as an editor
Oh,
because she's really good. Um, she was one of the main editors at their Sunday magazine for quite a while.
got it.
Um, so then we just figured we'd figure it out. So I got other jobs and I started a nonprofit for my brother, Tony, and did that for a couple of years, and then got rehired back at Surfer to be the editorial director over the action sports group as a freelancer by Don Meek. Don, if you're out there, hello.
He's
Um,
out there. I talk to Don regularly.
oh, good. Yeah, Don's Don's a great guy. So much energy. Um, but I did that for a couple of years, and then got hired, lucked into a job with David Milch on the show, John from Cincinnati. Um,
So, yeah, was that your first foray into television writing?
I'd written a screenplay that was just never didn't nothing happened with it. It was kind of um, it was like a Animal House thing set in the snowboard world, pretty bawdy and childish.
A
Um,
movie or TV?
it would have been for a movie. Yeah, I
Okay.
got uh, a small sum to write the screenplay. But that wasn't why I got the job at all. I'd always had an interest in it, but um, so Kim Nunn, the novelist, um, I had hired him to write a story for Surfer at one point, so we got to be friends. Um, and he kept telling me, "Hey, look, I'm working on this show, Deadwood, and David Milch and I are going to create this new show that's going to be set in the surf world. I'd love for you to be part of it. You really should come up and meet this guy." And at that point, I'd had a few things in Hollywood that just all went south, where I put a shit ton of work into them, like write a treatment, and we're just about to get funded. Someone once told me it's really easy to get close in Hollywood. So I was kind of soured on it. But he finally persuaded me to come up. So I got to go to to the 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 set of Deadwood, um, and meet with because they were still shooting the last season of Deadwood, and meet with Milch to talk about the surf thing, and he hired me to be the like surf consultant, and then to be a staff writer, which was really just like life. That was life changing. That was a really cool job.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I was going to ask you if it was a positive experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. God, it was amazing. I mean, it was hard because I was living up here,
Yeah,
driving down. So because you had that one, you definitely couldn't do remotely. You had to be in the writer's room with Milch.
sure.
Um,
What was life changing about it?
uh, just getting to be in the same room with David Milch and watch him figure out how to create a story.
Got it.
He's he's this uh, kind of crazy guy who's the smartest, literally the smartest person I've ever met,
Hmm.
the most articulate person I've ever met, for sure the most articulate. Had been a professor of literature at Yale uh, while taking acid almost every day, and um, was a protege of Robert Penn Warren. That he always called Robin his teacher, my teacher, he would say. Um, and had created NYPD Blue, was on the show Hill Street Blues, and then Deadwood, which I think is arguably one of the 3 or 4 best shows in the history of television. That was him. That was all him. But he was so pathological that he couldn't be in front of a computer, so he would write publicly. He'd lie on the floor with all the other writers around him, and he would dictate to someone who was typing the script. So you got to watch him write scripts, and it was like being in the best possible screenwriting class for 8 hours a day for a year and a half.
Has
Um,
anybody ever told his story?
oh yeah, 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 yeah. He has uh, an autobiography that came out not too long ago called Life's Work, LIFE' work, Life's Work. Um, that tells his whole story. Yeah,
Okay.
New
I need
Yorker.
to look I need to look more into it. All of this is kind of news to me.
Yeah. So that was a game changer. That was where I learned about um, how to write dialogue. which is you got to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it till it sounds like the way people actually talk. And then how to tell stories uh, in a way that touch the reader or the viewer's spirit in subconscious ways that they don't even realize why they feel a certain way. Um, and to trust the process that you'll discover what the story wants to do just by being true to the characters and following them where they want to go. I mean, as long as you know you have a plot, but letting them sort of get you there. Um, that was a that was really a game changer. Yeah. One of the big differences about writing for the screen versus writing a novel or writing nonfiction is that it's all the whole adage about show don't tell in writing. Like you have to show that I can't tell you in a book. I can't tell you someone's smart. I can't say this guy's a genius. I have to show you him being smart, or I can't tell you he's funny. You have to show him being funny. Same with kindness or humility or anything. You have to show it. And in movies, the only way to do that is through behavior, characters' behavior. Unless you have like you get weak and use a voiceover, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I learned so much about how to craft a good story or a better story um, through that. Both for in the fiction, in the novel I just finished, and in nonfiction. Like to write a good nonfiction piece, you got to spend hours and hours with a person, so see them in those moments when they reveal their character,
Mm,
and then write it cinematically.
right. Um, the surf show that you were referencing is called Joan from Cincinnati, and it ran for one season on HBO.
Yeah,
I have never watched it. I've not watched an episode of it. I kind of always mean to go back and spend time with it just because I feel like I should. Um, it got poor reviews.
yes.
What was your impression of the show? Was it good? Did you like it? How did, like, in terms of how it turned out?
Yeah, I thought it could have been really good, uh, but at that point, David was, he eventually now is in care because he has really bad early onset Alzheimer's, David Milch,
Okay,
which is just a tragedy that brain is now kind of
totally.
um, but I think maybe some of that was starting to display itself on that show because that show went off the rails in terms of its themes and this kind of supernatural aspect of it. Um, and David had an idea of what the show meant, but none of us could ever, he would tell us, but none of us could ever really understand what he was talking about.
Got it.
The first three episodes are fucking good. Like, I think it's really good. And then it slowly goes off the rails. And no one kind of knew what it was about.
Okay, yeah, because often it goes off the rails outside of the writer's hands or outside of the director's hands and kind of in post or whatever. But
Yeah,
interesting that you saw it going off the rails through
yeah, we
production.
all did. We all did. And David was a fierce personality. He had final say. You know,
Especially at that point of his career.
yeah, yeah. I was that funny because I was just talking to Kem Nunn about it last week, and he made a point I had never thought of, which was if it hadn't gotten uh, if there wasn't so much anticipation about the show, if it had just been kind of quietly released, and had been allowed to build sort of a cult following, it might have succeeded. But because Deadwood was such a hit, they scheduled us um, so that when the last episode of The Sopranos aired, we were up next. So people who watched the end of the episode, here's the first episode, the pilot of John from Cincinnati, and then we moved into the Sopranos time slot,
Yeah.
9 o'clock on a Sunday. Like we were teed up to be super successful, and then it didn't coalesce the show. Um, there were a couple of actors on there that I think got hired that David didn't want, and he ended up he didn't like the actors, so he ended up making their characters increasingly hateful as well. uh, so yeah, it was really tragic. I thought this is it. This is my career. I'm a television guy. Like I'm gonna be a move up the ladder on this show with one of the best writers in the history of Hollywood. And, but it was short-lived.
Uh, uh, I know there was kind of references or rumors that the show was about the Fletcher family. Can you
Just
confirm or deny?
no, no. They're producers on the in the credits. Yeah, but only in terms of the structure of the family, not in terms of the stories.
Got
Because
it.
what they wanted was they wanted a grandfather who served, a son who served, who had some drug issues, and then he had a son. Um,
Who's actually played by his son,
Actually
Grayson?
played Fletcher, who is now skating for my brother's skate company and who's one of the best, uh, gnarliest pool skaters in the world. That guy can skate.
How was that cover shot like a month or two ago?
Unbelievable. That barefoot shot in Hawaii when he's
Un
doing a one-footed ollie barefoot at that gnarly bowl on the North Shore. Yeah, so
I,
great.
I don't even follow skating, and when I saw that, I was like, "Whoa, that is like the greatest cover shot I've seen in any sports mag in a long time."
I agree. So cool. I got to know him. So I knew him from the show a little bit when he was just he was like 10, 11, 12, 13, 13, I think, something like that. And I hadn't seen him since the show ended until just like 2 months ago when I was down at my brother's house and he was hanging out. And he's the nicest guy. He's really funny, cool. Looks like it's got the hair and the beard and he's all tatted up. And, yeah, I really like.
Well, do you have any ambition to revisit television writing?
Uh, you know, so I just finished my first novel and sold it to Viking Books, and I think it's probably going to get optioned, but I don't think I'm going to be hired to write that screenplay. I would love to, but I think if it gets optioned by a company with any kind of juice, they'll hire somebody who's more established than me. Um,
You could finagle your way into the room.
yeah, I mean, if it were a series for sure, but
Okay.
if it's a feature, usually that's a one-man show.
Mm.
Um, but no, the thing I don't like about Hollywood is you can write a really great thing. I think the second best thing I ever wrote is this screenplay. I wrote a spec screenplay right after I finished working on Joan from Cincinnati called Stupid Dog. That's set up here. It's about a young teenage kid who's a surfer, who's um, and I think it's the best thing I've ever written, except for this novel that I just finished. And it's been read by maybe 40 people, the screenplay, because unless it gets made, no one will see it. And for a movie to get made, so many stars have to align, you
Yeah.
know, like you can be just about to shoot and then Brad Pitt breaks his leg and then, or whatever it is, if whoever the stars are attached, because that's how you get them made. You attach stars. They get distracted. They go someplace else. Um, but what I like about a novel is whether you sell it or not, it's just yours. And if it sucks, it's all you. And if it's good, it's all you. Um, and I kind of fell in love with the process of it, the process of discovery of it, which I hadn't expected.
When did so Stupid Dog, is it is there anything in it that's time kind of sensitive, or would you be able to keep shopping that in 10 years from now?
Maybe,
Because
yeah,
that's a thing, like based on, I don't know, the success of the book or the optioning of the book, there could be an opportunity where somebody says, "Hey, if you want to do something
yeah,
in this space," and you
yeah.
go, "I just happen to have this ready to go,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. The one issue for me is that if this novel gains any kind of traction, it's very much a thriller. It's very much plot driven. There's nuclear terrorism involved, and there's action sequences in the surf, like along the coast, and so and I kind of wrote it with the cinematically, hoping that could be made into a movie. Stupid Dog is a very quiet film about a family, a kid who gets to know this old surfer and through his dog, and um, it's there's no action whatsoever, and it's very much it would be a small like $2 million indie film, like it's not a Bruckheimer kind of.
Yeah, be very different then.
Yeah, so I don't think that I'm not sure about it, but I would love to see it get made someday because I'm pretty proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. What are your favorite surf books?
Oh wow. Uh, what book I've revisited lately is Willard Bascom's Waves and Beaches.
Don't
From
have that.
he was the first oceanographer to really kind of study how waves affect the nearshore zone. And I have a paperback that came out. It came out in the 60s. I have one of the original paperbacks, but Patagonia issued a reprint of it that's hardcover that's filled with photos, and it has kind of an updated forward from a woman who worked with this guy. It's kind of the seminal book for how waves work. Uh,
Interesting.
it's really interesting, and he did some, just for the sake of research, did some gnarly stuff with this like this um uh what do you call that, a car that can go in the water, amphibious vehicle out in the surf, like just south of the Columbia River, like on 20-foot days. He was taking this thing out to
Wow.
measure how deep the water was. And, um, uh, yeah, that book's fun. It's interesting. Um, what others? Well, anything by Warshaw, Warshaw's stuff, like all of his stuff, especially the encyclopedia and the history of surfing. Those two, you kind of those are must-haves, I think, for anybody. But also the book of his I go back to now and again is the Mavericks, the story of big wave surfing.
I never
See
never read
that
that.
coffee table book? Um, it's really, really smart. Uh, he um, it's he frames it. It's the history of big wave surfing, but he frames it around that week in '94 when Fu died at Mavericks. They had that 5-day run of swell. That was in December of '94. Um, and so the opening chapter is that Monday, and kind of a little bit of history of Mavericks and who's up there surfing. And then the second chapter goes back to the beginning of big wave surfing. And then the third chapter is Tuesday here. And then the fourth chapter is more about the history of surfing. Then he gets it's really well done. Yeah, Matt's really good at structure and also just his wordsmithing is sentence by sentence. He's as good as anybody.
Yeah.
The guy
What
who I writes a book someday is Parmenter, talking about wordsmithing.
have you maintained any contact with him?
Some, not enough. Yeah, I feel like we talk every 2 or 3 years, um, and he's 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 a very solitary guy. Like he's not the kind of guy who's going to write me a birthday card or anything. Um, but I sure admire him. And I really admire what an autodidact he is. He just is completely self-taught, never schooled, and still the piece he wrote for Surfer about the Alaska trip he did in the early '90s with Brock and Josh Mulcoy and Bob Barber. This, I think, maybe one of the best surf magazines ever. I mean, surf magazine articles ever written. And yeah,
I'd have to look that one up. I've never read that.
really, I'll send it to you. It's so
Okay.
good.
Yeah, if
So
you have it, please.
yeah. One other book, my favorite surf autobiography ever, it's hard to find, is Greg Knowles' Da Bull, Dabull. It's um I have an autographed copy of it from him, which I'm one of my most prized possessions, but it's tattered. It's all fallen apart. So I've tried to buy it online, and it's like $400 or something. Like,
They did like one printing of it or something.
yeah, yeah, it's really rare. But it's so good. What he did was he got this woman who's a very good journalist, can't remember her name, uh, to go interview all of his friends from the past. And so a lot of it is, some of it's him talking story, and he's so good, but a lot of it is just his friends talking story about him and giving him shit, like, and also love. Um, it's really well crafted and just lively as hell, and you learn a lot about that era. And he's
Perfect.
such a big, uh, boisterous, fun guy.
Yeah.
It's just infused with his personality. Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with the book. I'd never seen it or read it, but now I'll keep my eyes peeled for it.
Yeah, if you can find it, it's hard to, like, eBay. Good
Right.
luck. It's a book I finally read just a couple of years ago that I can't believe I never did. Uh, that has nothing about surfing in it, but every California surfer should read it, is 2 Years Before the Mast by Richard Henry Dana.
Okay, don't know it.
So Dana Point is named after him.
Oh,
Um, and he was a contemporary of Melville's. And so he came around the Horn from the Boston area and up the coast, and was on the coast of California for a couple of seasons on this boat that was gathering cowhides for commerce. So it's the history of the California coast back then, before any of the harbors were in. So there were only, like, when storms came up, there were only like four places to kind of get out of it. Uh, you either had San Diego, um, that was a safe harbor, Santa Barbara a little bit, although on south winds it wasn't so good, and San Francisco Bay for sure. Um, but just to read about what like, San Diego was probably had a population of 200, 300 people at the time, like all these places were just beginning to be established. It's a really interesting book.
when was the book written?
1800s, late
Wow.
1800s.
Okay.
Um, I have this tattered
Okay.
1860s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious. I want to hear your thoughts on up and coming writers and like, do you have any advice? And then, my concern is kind of because there's fewer magazines and fewer outlets for the work, that it
Mhm.
just cultivates fewer writers. I
Yeah.
think if I were born 10 years prior, I would probably have pursued writing as a profession rather than podcasting, because I have an interest in it. I have a little bit of a background in it, but it was just like, I don't know, there's nowhere for the work to be displayed.
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts? Do you keep up with surf writing
Yeah.
currently, and any advice or for how to cultivate the talent without necessarily having the magazine structure?
Um, Yeah, it's so different, these days than when I started, because like I said, when I started in newspapers, the path was really clear. You started a small daily, you move to a little bigger daily, you move to and then you get to a place where you're actually making a real living. But I think so I think there's a young writer has to ask themselves two questions. Do you want to make a living at it? Or do you want to pursue it as an art? And if you want to make a living at it, then you're going to have to get on a treadmill someplace these days. Um, and at least initially learn how to report and write a story quickly. I'm friends with this young guy who's from Half Moon Bay, who's now a staffer at Surfer, named August Howell. Um,
I've seen his name.
August and I kind of had similar trajectories. He was working for the Half Moon Bay Review after college, which is the little weekly here, very similar to the little paper I started at. And then he's a serious surfer. He just started doing some freelance work for the surf websites. But now that he's at Surfer, Jake Howards is the editor there. I just ran into him actually a couple of weeks ago, and um, those guys are kind of obligated to do a lot of stories. Like they're putting up two or three things a day, not individually. So a lot of what they're doing is just sort of repurposing, Instagram stuff, and that stuff is in the long run not going to be very gratifying to your soul as a writer, for sure. um, but it can teach you how to. I think it's good for all. Really helpful for any young writer to learn. Go work for a little weekly paper or a daily paper and learn how to gather facts, organize them, and write them in a coherent fashion quickly on deadline. So like that's done, move on to the next thing. Don't worry about polishing every sentence. Just get it done, get it out the door. That's a great skill to have. That'll apply to a whole bunch of things in your life, in any kind of job you have where you have to communicate with people through a writing. Although fuck with Chat GPT, who's going to be, it's going to be writing anything anymore.
Great question.
But so that, and I think there are ways, like August has managed it. He worked his way up, got a job. He's now working full time at Surfer Magazine, and making a living as a surf journalist. So it's possible, but I think there's that kind of writing, and then there's like creative writing. Do you want to write fiction, or do you want to write really interesting long form nonfiction that has all of the elements of fiction, that deploys, all the aspects of fictive persuasion to tell a story, nonfiction story. And that I think you gotta probably take a class with somebody who knows how to teach that stuff, at least just once. And then start reading really good writers and try hard to figure out what makes their stuff work, why it's good, what do you like about it. And also talk to people who are in that world, who have more experience than you, who can help you figure out why that stuff is good, and find a good editor. I've been doing this now for a long time. I turned 70 next month. Like I've been at this a long time. Is that all the pieces that I'm most proud of, that I look back over the 50 years, 40 years I've been doing this, are stuff that I just was going to write, whether that was going to sell or not. And that's the stuff that really ultimately matters to me now, looking back. So, find it. The other hard thing is, especially in nonfiction, is curating your own interests so you find a really good story. Like find out who's got the best story out there. When I was at Surfer, the two of my favorite pieces we ever did, well, three of them were Parmenter's piece where he first went to Alaska. Bruce Jenkins did a profile of Pat Curran when Curran was living down in Cabo, and Curran told him, "Don't come. I'm not going to talk to you." And he went down there anyway and showed up with a 12-pack of beer, and he let him in, and he wrote this really nice long piece about Curran and his relationship with Tom. And then later in my career, I started realizing, like, go find the story. Just because someone's won a world title doesn't mean they're interesting. My favorite piece I did at Surfer, I think, was a profile of the Malloy family, because of their sister. Have you ever heard the story of their sister? So they had a severely disabled younger sister who was born with all these, like, deaf, blind. I'm not sure that I have all that right, but this super rare disease that was just completely debilitating. And the doctors told her, their parents told Chris and Dan and Keith's parents, this girl needs to be institutionalized, like from birth. She's not going to live long. And their mom said, no, I'm going to take care of her. So they brought her home, and that is why those guys are all so solid. I think, one of the big reasons, because they realized no matter what shit they go through, this thing be like nothing like what their sister's going through. Um, and uh, and I think I didn't do enough of that when I was at Surfer, going out and finding those stories, like just the really interesting stories. No matter, you don't have to be in the tour to merit a profile, as long as we can get some shots of you, in a good barrel or doing a nice brown house cutback, Uh,
I mean, do you subscribe to the Surfer's Journal?
I do. Yeah,
Because I mean, that's similar to their ethos.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Um, Absolutely. Yeah, they do. They do a good job of finding the interesting, quirky, unexpected stories out there, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
And actually, your missive of as long as we can get a shot of you in the barrel doesn't even apply there.
that's right. Right. That's right.
um, what other surf media do you follow at this point?
I'm a big fan of Stab. I think those guys, I think Sam is really doing a great job there. I love their How Surfers Get Paid series.
New
Uh,
episode drops today.
oh, okay, cool. Uh, and they're sometimes a little too cozy with the industry, but he's got just a really good eye for what people want to see. Um, I think I like that they don't pull punches when they do a deep dive into like all the all the inner workings of the WSL and who's coming and going, and they'll go after the industry a little bit sometimes. Yeah, I follow Stab a lot. I look at Surfline 5 times a day. Cameras and all that. They've kind of moved. I talked to Marcus about this lately. They've sort of moved away from their editorial model, and they're really leaning into their tech.
Yeah,
I think Taylor Paul's working there now too. That's
I
probably
didn't know that.
um, and Surfer Journal. I get the Surfer Journal. I read that for sure. Um, God, I know I'm forgetting something. Um, oh, and Surfer Mag. Their print mag. I thought their second issue was very good.
I haven't gotten it yet. Their social media guy just messaged me this morning and said, "Hey, have you seen it? We'll send you one." So I need to respond to that.
Yeah.
So, um, we haven't actually talked a lot about surfing itself, but can you think of the best surfing that you've ever witnessed?
In person. Yes, for sure. Uh, I did a two. One was I talked Surfer Magazine into sending me on one of those Surf with a Pro trips that Billabong was doing back in the 90s, and got to go to Kandui with Rasta and Dorian. And I knew Shane a bit already, but I'd never met Rasta, and just love both those guys. They're super solid travel companions. And we got rifles at Kandui, like on a solid double overhead day. Um, and I got to watch those two guys up close at one of the best long right tubes in the world. And that was like as humbling as it gets. That. And then the other one was one time Slater had an event at Fiji at Tabarua. I don't remember what it was, but it was something he put together where he invited everybody to come. So it was unrelated to the tour, but like Andy was there, Aki, Curran, Kelly, Dorian, um, and then some celebrities who also surf. My brother was invited, Tony, and
Was Perry Farrell there?
Earl was there.
I do remember this now.
And they did a thing where they had a doubles heat at like 6 foot low tide dredging cloud break. Two guys on a wave. They were teammates. So they had to like share a wave. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen because it would be like Andy and I forget who. I don't think it was Bruce. I remember Andy was on a wave with somebody, um, maybe Margot, and just ripping like in surfing right at the at far back as you can, while the other guys, doing crossovers and stuff. I'd love to see someone put together a doubles contest.
That's amazing.
It was the coolest thing.
I hate to do it to you, but with the Shane Dorian and Rasta session at Rifles, did one of those guys stand out above the other?
Um, I would say that Rasta won the heat that day. He got like 'cause I've gone back and watched video of it. They had a videographer there, so I've seen it, and he got a couple of just long, long draining barrels, and also he's just one of the most stylish surfers in history, riding this little twin fin. Um, but but Dorian, I remember there's video of him just pulling into this massive cave and doing a double hand drag when he's already as deep as I'd ever want to be. Just trying to slow himself down. Uh, yeah, I love Dorian.
How great was Rastovich in this electric acid surfboard test?
That was so much fun. Yeah,
So much fun. Just being able to watch him surf that much because we don't get to see a ton of him,
I
but
agree.
then hearing his style of communication, he's just so insightful.
Yeah, I agree. I found that to be true on that trip too. I always thought he was going to be this super crunchy hippie, like I can't watch you eat meat kind of dude. But he was having beers and telling good stories, and he's definitely a bloke,
Yeah.
not like a um not holier than thou in any way.
Yeah. Well, and then Shane Dorian having kind of been introduced to surfing during the momentum generation, he was never my favorite. He's probably like seventh or eighth on the list of my favorites. But now, at this phase in life, to see what he's still doing, he has become my absolute favorite. Like, he is so inspirational.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I just watched the clips of he's in Kandui right now, right, with his kid,
That's right. Yeah.
and I
I think
watched some of that. Yeah. So Shane and I got to be pretty good friends because the one guy who I really got to know well when I was at Surfer and who I would like spend holidays with sometimes was Brock Little. So when Brock would come, I would stay with his family and I was on the North Shore, and he'd stay with me when he came to Surf Mavericks. And then one time he brought Dorian, and Dorian, they both stayed here. And then Brock stopped surfing big waves. And then so when Dorian would come over, he would stay with us. Um, and uh, and I also traveled with him once to Chile, so I got to know Shane pretty well. Um, and he's just such a rock solid dude, just really. I think we probably part ways politically right now, he and I. But other than that, I just think the world of him. He was here staying at my house that day. He almost drowned when he came up with that idea to invented the the vest.
inflatable vest.
He that morning he left here at like before daybreak to go surf, and then at about 8:30 or 9 in the morning, my son looks out and said, "Hey, Dad, your friend Shane's out there in the driveway in his wetsuit." So he had that near death experience, that two-wave hold down, and then went back to the boat and just said to someone, "Take me to shore." And they jet skied him back to the parking lot, and he climbed in his rental car and drove here, and in his wetsuit, like a half hour after that whole thing went down. And he was in shock. He was like a dead man. And our house, this downstairs room where he was staying, that time of year, it faces south. It gets really hot. It was like 85 degrees in the room in the time of day, like not a place you'd want to hang. he went in and took a shower for like 45 minutes to warm up, and then laid on the couch we had under blankets in this room that was like 80 degrees, shivering. Because he was truly in shock. Like if I'd known what I know now, I would have like made sure that he was okay. Um, and then was just so fucking rattled, like talking about, I don't know if you've seen his interviews about that, where Jackson, he sees his son while he's underwater and he thought he was going to die and this is going to be what my last thought. Um, and then it was on that flight home, that trip, when he watched the stewardess inflate the vest and came up with the idea for um,
Did he verbalize any of this to you before he left?
about, yeah, he just said, "I've never surfed Mavericks to play again. That place is evil. Like, I don't know, why do I do this? I don't think I'm ever going to surf big waves again." Like he was like, "This is selfish. I almost left my son behind." You know, he was pretty fucked up. And then of course he went back and completely dominated it. Jaws.
He's taken it slow though in the last 8 years or so.
Yeah, he's definitely slowed down. He's not surfing big waves anymore, I don't think.
No, I mean, it was probably 8 years ago. They were broadcasting the Piahi event, and he was invited to that. The Piahi Challenge, I think, is what they call it. And he was in the booth during the opening heat, and they're like, "Aren't you supposed to be out there?" He goes, "You know what? I think last year was my last year." He's like, "I rocked up this morning, and it's not for me anymore. I got
Wow.
too much on the line, you know."
So he made the decision in that moment.
That's the way he said it.
Wow.
And I mean,
He was on
obviously,
the heat sheet.
what's that?
He was on the heat sheet.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that story.
Yeah. And I mean, look, he's still last week getting 12-foot barrels over over shallow reef. So he's still surfing death-defying waves. It's just not 50-foot Piahi, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a distinction there.
Yeah. That guy can take a hit, man.
Well, he's more fit now than ever before,
Oh,
too.
it's
So,
ridiculous. Yeah. His exercise routine.
and
Yeah.
diet, you know.
Everything. That's right.
Um, near at the age of 69, what's your current relationship like with surfing?
Uh, it is, I still kind of, it's central to my life. You know, I am checking it every day, trying to go out. But I got to tell you, I get um, sad sometimes because I just don't have the gumption that I used to have. Like I don't have I don't have the physical capacity and the the reflexes to surf the waves I want to surf as as often as I can. Um, like chest high little peelers are fun, but they don't interest me that much. You know, like I'd much rather have a 6 to 8 foot face that's got some heft to it. And I when I get out in those waves, if I'm on a short board, I can't get to my feet in time. And so I'm riding mid lengths, 7.0, 7.4, and those are I can get up, but you can't. You're always surfing 10 feet ahead of the pocket, you know.
Yeah,
Um, so and I'm also just not as limber, you know, like I don't know the last time I've actually done a solid off the top, you know. Uh, um,
Shane Dorian's figured out a way how to reverse that process. Are you doing anything physically or dietary wise to
I started working out a bit more. For the first time ever, I'm now like doing to a trainer twice a week and doing Pilates once or twice a week. That just all started about a year ago. Just because I need to, and that's just keeping me flatline. You know, that's just keep
totally?
stable. Um, uh, and in fact, I got to leave in about 20 minutes. But um, you know, around here in Half Moon Bay area, um, there's a lot of days where you're on the beach, and the problem is you don't think you'll be able to paddle out because it's too
Yeah.
big. And and I would see these kids on their 6'2s just going out and muscling it, duck diving their way out. And the boards I'm riding, I can't really duck dive that well anymore.
Yeah.
So I always, one thing I've gotten much better at is reading the ocean. So I try to find places where there are rips that maybe aren't that visible unless you kind of know what to look for. And so I'll have a lot of sessions here where I'll make it out, get a couple of waves, get caught inside, just come to shore, walk back to the rib and go back out rather than just kill myself by duck diving or ditching under, 15
Yeah.
waves.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
Well, I want to read something to you if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
Comes from this magazine.
Okay. I remember that. I was
You
there.
remember you were referencing the big issue earlier? This wasn't the
Oh, yeah,
same
that
year,
was
was it?
310 pages, something that one.
This one's October 1996.
I think that was our first big issue.
I think it was too, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so what'd you say, 310?
Yeah. Something like that. 316 maybe.
258 is the last page that is a non-advertisement, and then
Okay.
there's two or three after that.
Okay. Okay. We got up to over 300 with a couple of those. So
Well, I wanted to read you something since we're talking about longevity. Do you mind sitting through this?
sure.
Okay, cool. In the intro, you wrote, spend a couple of months thinking about the future of surfing, which was the title of this issue. The future is now. Uh, and you can't help but envision yourself in it. You'll no doubt dream of taking advantage of the good, the durable boards, the wetsuits as thin as t-shirts, the forecasting gadgets, maybe even the backdoor style wave pools. And you'll probably wonder how you'll deal with the bad, the toxic seas, the ugly mobs, the surf camps encircled by barbed wire. At some point, though, it's going to hit you that the most important thing about the future, the distant future at least, is this: you're going to be a geezer. If you're reading this, you'll probably already made the decision that you're going to surf till you die, which means there will come a day when younger surfers look at you with the same dismissive smirk that they once wore, maybe even still wear when you saw an old fart in the water. Dude, did you see that ancient mariner over there? They'll whisper to each other when they reach the lineup. Did you see that board? Check out the way he paddles like a freaking hunchback. And dig those sliver spots, those hairless little stick legs. To get an idea of what it's like to go through surfing's middle age, I called up Mickey Munoz a couple days ago and asked if he wanted to go for a session. Munoz may be the most surf-stoked 58-year-old surfer in the world. For the record, I didn't notice any unsightly liver spots, and Mickey's legs are in great shape. He does paddle a little funny, though. I met him at his house in Capistrano Beach, and we piled into his rattling 1969 Econoline van, the automotive equivalent to Kevin Costner's boat in Waterworld. It looks like a junker, but it's actually an incredibly functional surf van with more hooks and crannies than any surfer could ever need. Munoz carries six boards at a time, and unless you look close, you can't see any of them. We drove to San Onofre Beach late in the day and surfed a spot called, you guessed it, Old Man's. The waves were weak, even by Sano standards. On almost any other occasion, I would have turned around without getting out of my car, but we were on a mission, and the sunset was electric, and before I knew it, I was walking across the sand with a strange-looking 8'2" swallowtail under my arm. I think you'll like that board, Mickey said. It rides like a shortboard. At the water's edge, we ran into Herbie Fletcher. Then, while we were chatting with Herbie, Skip Fry rode a wave to within a few feet of the shore and hooted and waved. It suddenly hit me that something, or it suddenly hit me that something was off. I am not Mickey Munoz. I never will be. Among surfers, Mickey is a living icon. He was in the lineup charging the day they first rode Waimea Bay in 1957. John Severson even ran a photo of Munoz in the first issue of Surfer, and not just any photo, but the now famous forward squatting left arm Quasimodo photo, one of the most enduring images in the history of the sport. And today, nearing his 59th birthday, Munoz makes all of his own boards, surfs more than most Groms, and runs into his legendary piers in the water all the time. I began to worry that I'd wasted Mickey's time, that I'd have to call him in a few days and tell him that I decided to write a piece about something else. I have a specific image of what my surfing life will be like when I'm up around 60 or 70. And yes, it includes liver spots and hairless little stick legs. But beside from the physical decay, I doubt much will change from the way that it is now. I still get up early when there's swell. I still drive around by myself most of the time in search of a blank stretch of empty beach. I'll sit in the lineup anonymously and I'll get that adrenaline surge when an empty, well shaped peak heads my way. As Mickey and I paddled out for a few soft ones, I replayed a scene that's been stored in my brain for a long time. About 15 years ago, I surfed a spot in Ventura called Stables. The place draws a lot of geezers, and as I pulled out my wetsuit that day, one of them walked up and strapped his board atop the car next to mine. The guy must have been about 65, alone. He knelt down, grabbed his Haida key, opened the door, wrapped a towel around his waist, stepped out of the wetsuit, slipped on an old pair of bell-bottom cords, threw on a t-shirt, sat in the driver's seat, and drove off. Like that. Boom, he was gone. No cooler, no beach chair, no worn stories about the bitchin' days gone by. Just a guy having a session and jetting home. Same as almost every surfer I know, except he was old enough to be my grandpa. That's the kind of surfer I want to be when I'm 65, though I hope my board will be shorter and my waves will be a little thicker. I told this story to Mickey as we drove home in the dark from San Onofre, half expecting him to shrug it off, but he zeroed in on it like a mongoose on a mouse. That's the key to being a surfer, he said. You got to chase it. We don't live in the past. We can't live in the past. The only reason to keep surfing is because you like the way it feels. Yes, it keeps me healthy, he said. Yes, I like hanging out the beach and talking story with my old friends, but the thing that keeps me surfing is simple. I get just as excited by a good wave now as I ever did, maybe even more. Now that's good news because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty stoked right now. Steve Hawk.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't read that since for fucking years.
I
Um,
thought it was poignant, you envisioning what it would be like to be surfing at 70.
so what's crazy is no one has more grotesque hairless stick legs than I do. And the liver spots have gone wild. They're everywhere.
You saw it coming.
Was really accurate. And I still do that. Yeah, but the thing is, I don't even think about that, but I remember very vividly that image of that guy in his 60s at Ventura that day, because I think that was like in the 70s or 80s when there were no 65-year-old surfers around, you know.
Uh,
And I think subconsciously that dude's in the back of my mind when I go around looking for surf, because I at the time I even remember thinking, that's cool. I just want to be a surfer on my own, even at that age. But the other thing that hit me about that is, um, surfing, the act of surfing itself really is a metaphor for a life well lived, which is um, you're never more in the moment than when you're riding a wave. That's the because it's waves are defined by motion, which means they're defined partly by time, and you're moving through time. And we're all moving through time. Like the future and the past are forever kind of advancing. And um and as a surfer, you know, to live a good life, I think, or to just be kind of happy is to realize that we're always in motion and you kind of can't let the past uh worries about the past fuck you up too much, and you can't let worries about the future fuck you up too much. You have to be right here, right now. I mean, it's such a, hippie kind of Aldous Huxley thing to say, but um and yeah, fuck, I'm almost 70, but I'm still very, very, very happy.
yeah. I mean, that was the Steve Pesman, Timothy Leary article, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's exactly what that was
Those
about.
are particularly uh they're the advanced species.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything else gets washed away, but you're in the moment. You have to be in the moment. I think that's great advice. It's hard to maintain and live on a daily basis, but it is the goal.
You
Did
know
you
what?
see? Go ahead.
I think I was just in Chicago for a friend's wedding, and I went to the art museum there, the Chicago Art Institute, which is the second biggest art museum in the country. This was just like 3 days ago. And they've got all these incredible, they got everybody. a Picasso blue guitar guy and Van Gogh's self-portrait and then of course all the Renaissance paintings that are just vivid and real and so detailed and just look so lifelike. Um, but any painting that included the ocean and breaking waves, they couldn't get it. Like no one knew how to break. And I realized that it's because waves are defined by motion. And it wasn't until the advent of still photography that anyone ever saw what they looked like frozen. And then people were able to paint them, but because they were looking at still photographs, not because they were looking at the ocean. I literally, I don't think I've ever seen a pre uh, like 1800s, 1700s, 1500s painting of waves that looked anything like what waves look like. It,
I never thought about it. You're entirely right. I never thought about it. I can't think of any Renaissance works that involve waves, but I could think of people on ships where there's kind of like motion in the sea, but you're right, it doesn't look anything like waves.
right. Especially remember the early drawings of the Hawaiians where they're
Right.
riding on top of the crest. Like,
Right.
um,
It's
and
comical.
and I think it's because we often forget that waves they're defined by time. They're always moving. Um,
Yeah, there's something really poetic about that, and probably with a lot deeper meaning than I can fully wrap my head around now. Did the film
we'll start talking like we're complete hippies if we get into that too deep. Yeah.
the filmmaker Kyle Buthman in Santa Cruz did a
Stuff.
short film a month ago on Mickey Munoz. Did
I
you
haven't
see
seen
that?
that.
Okay. It's he does an ongoing series called Brainwork.
Have you seen the one on Adam Replogle
Yes.
and the one on Tashnik?
Yep.
Two of my those movies are so good. That guy is really good.
Really
And
good.
I've gotten to know him a little bit.
So his one on Mickey isn't as good, to be perfectly frank. But I think it's just from my perspective because it's all the same things Mickey has already talked about in his book and in a lot of other platforms. But it's still, if you're not exposed to Mickey Munoz prior, then you will think it is phenomenal. Um, but the thing that I appreciated about it was just seeing him today, you know?
Right.
And Kyle went down to his place in Baja and shot some footage down there. And it's incredible to see Mickey still at it.
Crazy. Wow.
I mean, he's adopted the stand-up paddle, of course, for the reasons that you like how he had a hard time getting to his feet and stuff like that, but he's still in the ocean every day. And the one thing that I hadn't seen previously is he's really into taking photos of shore break with a selfie stick. So
Wow.
so he has his iPhone on a selfie stick and he waits till the water, not like dumping shore break like Clark Little, but like just the water as it splashes up against a berm of sand and kind of ejects. He's got his camera down there so he doesn't have to bend over and he pulls the trigger a few times. Then he goes back and reviews the imagery. But it's like this guy's still exploring
Right.
photography, surf
Wow.
photography at this age.
That's so cool.
Super cool.
Boothman, Kyle Boothman, and I met with him because he's making a movie about Stretch, the
Oh,
shape,
I didn't know that.
and we talked a little bit about the narrative there, and but that guy's an interesting. That movie's going to be really good when he gets it done. I can't wait. I've seen a little bit of some of the raw footage, and that Stretch is a fascinating character.
Is it going to be just a short film like the Brainwork series?
Yeah, no, this is going to be more of a like he's trying to get funding to make like a real documentary out of it.
Perfect. Because Stretch's story needs that much time to tell.
Yeah,
I've done stuff with him in the past, but I just released an episode with him about 2 or 3 months ago. That's like a 90-minute full interview. So we cover a lot of it there.
the Stretch.
Yeah,
Yeah, what a story that guy has.
crazy.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I know you got to get to your personal trainer. Thank you for taking so much time here.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
So good to chat.
Right on. Okay, man. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thanks. Great to see you.
Surf Splendor.